recording. I've never recorded before, so I don't know how I'm going to get it to you guys to listen to afterwards, but we'll figure that out later. Now, I was on vacation until yesterday, so I had asked that BANC provide me some key topics that you wanted to discuss. Based upon my input, the input back to me, there was two main areas that you wanted to discuss. I've added a third because it seems to be an area that everybody has problems with or wants to discuss what it means as they get into parallel and then well into production. So what we're going to cover, and I'm going to see if I can remove my, is there a box covering part of this that you guys see?
Nope.
Okay. So
yeah, it looks good, James.
Okay. So the main areas we're going to discuss is, one is the resource efficiency test and how they interact with settlements. The second one was a request from Reading on MRI settlement, the bill determinant files and how to validate them. That's been more of an open discussion than anything else. I'll talk a little high level on what those are, but I'd like to find out in what aspect you want to talk about that more. But the area that I added is the real-time offset charge codes. I'm going to talk about what it is that they mean and why we have them, and then how we go about calculating them. This always seems to be an area that EIMs seem to focus on when they're coming on. What does it mean? How do I allocate these charges? Why do I have these charges? After that, I'm going to open it up for just straight discussion. I did get requests to look at some city tickets. I have not gotten an opportunity to look at them. They got assigned to me yesterday, so I can open them up during this this workshop, and we can discuss them, but I won't have the answers for you. I mean, unless it's a theoretical answer, I won't have the details on why, let's say, you didn't get an award, or why residual imbalance energy is calculated a certain way. I know those are some of the topics on the headers of the city tickets, but I'll have to do some research to give you full details on what is going on in that particular scenario. So if we're ready, I'm just going to kick off to the sufficiency test. Is there any questions before we start? Okay, no questions. So, okay. Oh, that was weird. So our first topic is resource efficiency test and settlements. So what I'm going to talk about here is, what is the resource efficiency test, what is the timing for them, and then how they interact with settlements itself. So the resource efficiency tests are designed to ensure that the EIM BAA is not coming in balance or coming in not leaning on the other BAAs going into real-time market. We want to ensure that when that balancing authority area is ready to participate, they are in a neutral state in essence, and can get the full utilization of the real-time market optimization with the dispatching of energy to serve internal demand, as well as using your own resources to meet external demand. So what we run is called the resource efficiency test. Currently we run them 3 times for each hour. We run it at T75, T55, and then the final one is T40. And so what we will be having is, in the future, there's an initiative which will be adding a new run at T40 that is advisory, and we will make the final results at T30. Currently, when you guys first go live, T40 will be your final results of the sufficiency test. The reason why we run the first two advisory ones is so that you have an opportunity to rectify any of the test failures or concerns that are raised from these sufficiency tests. Now, there's three basic tests associated with it. Actually, let me, before I go into that, let's go into what is included in the resource plan that has gone into the sufficiency test. First is the hourly base schedules. These will be for the non-participating as well as participating resources, including your interchange schedules. So this tells us basically what you cleared outside of the ISO market, what is your, what I would call it, the day ahead position. You know, I have come into the real-time market with a specific position for my resources to serve a certain amount of load. But then you're also, the participating scheduling coordinators will also be submitting energy bids. And this is for all the EIM participating resources. In addition, you're also, as part of your base schedules, you're also going to tell us which resources have upward and downward available balancing capacity. And this is capacity that is used under very unique conditions where we need to lean on this extra capacity in order to meet your demand. You may have, let's say you failed the capacity test and that demand forecast has to materialize. We may have to use that available balancing capacity to meet that demand forecast. And what we'll do is the market will assign default energy bids to that available balancing capacity. Now, it's only under contingency type conditions, so it's very rare that we ever use it, but there is a second element of it. And it's actually what's related to that last bullet. It's letting us know what the contingency reserves are as well as the contingency reserve requirements. This available balance capacity, when you identify it, you will tell us what portion of that is regulation up, regulation down, spin, non-spin. And so when we do some of our calculations and settlements, if we see that a resource that has available balance capacity of regulation has a deviation, we're going to treat it in a similar way we do a resource in the ISO balancing authority area. We're going to make the assumption that that resource's imbalance was due to regulation. And what we'll calculate is regulation energy. And instead of charging you for uninstructed imbalanced energy or paying you for uninstructed imbalanced energy, we in essence will convert that uninstructed into regulation energy and pay you and charge you accordingly. Now, that regulation energy is limited by that available balance capacity for reg up or reg down. So let's say this unit has 10 megawatts of uninstructed imbalanced energy. So they schedule 100, meter was 110, and it got no dispatches through the market. Well, that 10 megawatts, I'm going to look to see, did you have any regulation up associated with that resource? If you did, let's say this resource had 6 megawatts of regulation up. I am now going to consider 6 of that 10 megawatt uninstructed imbalanced energy as regulation energy. The 4 I'm going to consider as uninstructed imbalanced energy. So when you provide these resource plans, it is crucial that you tell us what portion of that available balancing capacity is reserved for regulation up and regulation down. Now, once you provided us with these resource plan, and again, we need to have the first set of the resource plan by the T minus 75. We're going to run these 3 tests. One is a balancing test, one is a capacity test, one is a flex ramp test. Now, each one has different requirements and needs. And actually, I'm going to, yeah. So the balancing test, I think I should have taken this slide out, to be honest. Sorry. but we'll go into more detail what each test means. But the balancing test is we're trying to determine if the base schedules are balanced against the demand forecast. Now, there's two things that we have to take into consideration on this balancing test. One is who's supplying the demand forecast. If you're using the ISO demand forecast, then the ISO is allowing for, or we have built in a 1% threshold of that demand forecast. So when you submit your base schedules, if your base generation and intertie schedule or net intertie schedule are within 1% of the demand forecast, you're considered to have passed. And therefore, we'll go into details what that means. If you're using your own forecast, we don't make any of threshold. We don't have any assumptions. We assume that you're going to have a specific overscheduling, underscheduling charge code assessment performed because we are trying to make sure that you're not leaning on another balancing authority area. The second test is the capacity test. Now, this is pretty simple understanding what this test is for is, does your participating resources bids provide enough capacity to meet our imbalance needs, up and down? If there is an imbalance requirement that says I need 500 megawatts of upward capacity and I've only provided 480 as bids, then you're going to fail this upward capacity test. Now, it has some ramifications on the flexible ramp test, but we'll go more detail on that. But in essence, we're trying to make sure that you have enough bids to meet the imbalance requirements. Now, the flexible ramp is similar to the capacity test, and actually they're linked. We're also trying to make sure that the capacity that you did provide has enough 5-minute flexible responding to ramping capability to it to meet our flexible ramp requirement. And this flexible ramp requirement goes into what we're expecting for forecasted movement and uncertainty. So we're understanding we have a one interval to another. We're seeing that there's a ramp on the load. We need this resources to be able to meet that ramp. We have to have enough 5-minute flexible resources to meet that ramp. Plus, we have done some type of studies and said that under certain conditions that this forecasted ramp can actually have some uncertainty to it, which means it can go higher or lower than that forecasted ramp. So we have to make sure we have enough reserved capacity in order to ensure that if that uncertainty materializes, we can now ramp resources to meet that need and not put your balancing authority area into a reliability issue. So now the big thing about this is, and I go into it, the very last bullet is, if you fail the capacity test, you automatically fail the flex test. Okay. So when I go into it, I talk a little bit more about the capacity test in the more details. As I said, do you have enough energy bids to meet the imbalance requirement? Now, as we're running the capacity test, we look both up and down. And we look, if you fail the up capacity test, then you're going to fail the flex up capacity or flexible ramp test. Same with down. And what it does is it has ramifications on what we allow that balancing authority area to get energy or to provide energy. If you have, but this capacity test, if you pass this, you could still fail the flex, but it doesn't have any ramifications unless you fail this test in a particular direction, because the ramification comes into settlements for how the market allows the BAA to get energy from the flexible ramp test. And I'll go into more details about that right now. So the flexible ramp test, you know, as I said before, the whole purpose of it is to determine if you have enough flexible resources to meet both the net load change plus uncertainty. Now, if you fail the flexible ramp test, you could fail it in one direction, you could fail it in both directions. We run these tests to ensure that you're not leaning or others aren't leaning on you. So, for example, if the bank had put enough bids in and had enough capacity to meet the imbalance need, but then when we go look at the flexible resources, we determine that you don't have enough 5-minute flexible resources to meet the net load and uncertainty. In the upward direction, we're going to say you failed the flex ramp up test. Now, the ramifications of this is that we are going to now lock the import directions of your ETSRs. And the reason why we do that, because if you fail your flexible ramp up test, you are coming into the market in a situation that if that uncertainty materializes, you have to lean on another balancing authority area in order to resolve that net load change. And so we are saying that we're not allowing you to lean because you're coming into it already leaning. And so now all your resources should be used to resolve your own net load change, and you shouldn't be relying on other balancing authority areas to resolve that. The same occurs with flexible ramp down. However, instead of limiting the import direction, we now limit in the export direction. Now for BANC, prior to when it was just BANC SMUD, but prior to Turlock joining, there wasn't a need to worry about the base transfer schedule. However, when we do the limit now, we are going to look to see what your base scheduled transfer for the failed interval, as well as the net EIM schedule for the interval prior. Whichever of these two is the more limiting factor, that's what will limit that direction to. So if we have determined that you failed the flexible ramp up and your base transfer shows you have 100 megawatts coming in, and the interval net transfer before, interval 4 showed it was 80, then we will limit your transfer capability to the 80 megawatts. And that means you can't transfer any additional megawatts in. You still honor your base transfer, you can't transfer any additional energy in. So, you know, as I was saying, it's mainly designed to ensure that your balancing authority area isn't leaning on another balancing authority area. Now, a lot of questions I get is, how does this impact settlement? Well, this has an indirect impact on settlements and not a direct impact on settlements. The flexible ramp charge codes are only impacted related to this in the fact that your energy may not be used to resolve the EIM, or your flexible awards are not being used when we're determining the EIM area requirement. We're not allowing any netting to occur based upon your balancing authority area. So there is no real direct correlation between the flexible ramp awards and the flexible ramp test, but it does limit the amount of energy you can have coming in, and it does limit the ability for your flexible ramp requirement to be used to net against the EIM area requirement. So any questions on this so far? I'll go into the balancing test later. Actually, I'll talk about it a little bit right now. The balancing test, and I kind of talked about it on a high level, it's the only one that has a direct impact on settlements of the sufficiency test, because if you fail the balancing test or you are using your own forecast, the ISO is going to basically determine how much your balancing authority area is leaning on other balancing authority areas. And that's by over-scheduling or under-scheduling your resources. However, we allow you to have a 5% threshold before the over-scheduling, under-scheduling charge code is triggered. So when we're doing the determination, we're going to look to see what was your uninstructed imbalanced energy, what was the threshold, and the first threshold is 5%. So 5% of your day-ahead schedule, day schedules. And if you exceed that 5%, then there is, in essence, a 25% charge for overscheduling and 50% charge for underscheduling, I believe it was. And basically what it's designed to do is we're trying to ensure that it's a penalty, it truly is a penalty, is that you are not making money by leaning on the other balancing authority area. It's a penalty for leaning on other balancing authority areas. Now, the two thresholds are 5% overscheduling or 5% underscheduling, and then 10% overscheduling and 10% underscheduling. But if you're within the 5%, we don't assess any penalty at all. If you're between the 5 and 10, we assess a penalty for overscheduling as well as underscheduling. There's different rates. And then same as the 10%. Now, the way to look at it, the overscheduling, underscheduling penalty is, this is supplemental to your UIE settlement of load. So let's say that you were 11% underscheduling, okay? That means your load is going to be higher. So, yeah. So at that point, your load is going to get a UIE charge of, the UIE times the real-time LMP. But it's also going to get a 100% UI charge for underscheduling in the charge code 6045. So this is a 100% penalty at that point if you're 10% underscheduling of your load. Now, if you're overscheduling, then it's going to be a similar thing, but in the opposite direction. You're going to get down to 50% of it is going to be charged back to you. So you only get paid. So in your UIE, you would get paid at 100%, and then in essence, you would get 50% charged back to you under this charge code. Now, if you pass the test for the entire day, then you, as a balancing authority area, are eligible to receive payments for any other balancing authority areas overscheduling, underscheduling charge. And this will go to your metered load. So again, the balancing test is the only one that has a direct impact on our settlement charge codes, because we are going to determine how much you are leaning, and if you're leaning on above a certain percentage, then we are going to assess the penalty. And again, I hope you guys caught what I said a second ago, was being eligible to receive payments or compensation for other balancing authority areas leaning on you. You have to have not failed this balancing test at all for the entire day. If you fail it at all throughout the day, then you are not eligible to receive any of the overscheduling, underscheduling payment allocation, because at some point in that day you were leaning on somebody else, and therefore you are not eligible for the payment allocation. Now, any questions on the balancing test? And then I'll go more into what this slide means as well.
We're still here, James, just so you know.
I was going to say, I didn't think I was doing that great of a job.
We, just so you know, and this is very helpful, we dug into some of these things pretty deeply in our work groups as we were working on allocations. So hopefully this is just reinforcement of stuff that people know, but it's been very helpful to sort of reinforce it. So thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. So that's good to hear. Thanks, Jeff. It makes my job a lot easier, actually. But one of the things that I want you to know about this particular slide is I try to give an indication on this slide of where charge codes are triggered based upon certain actions throughout the market runs. You have before the market, which in this case would be the sufficiency test. And if you notice, I only have the balancing test there. I don't have the flexible ramp charge code. And that's because it's not, failing the flex test does not impact the flexible ramp awards and uncertainty. That's going to happen regardless. It's just whether or not there's two things that are really going to be under consideration. One is, as I said, is can your requirement, the resources meeting your requirement, be netted against the EIM area requirement? If you fail, you can't. If you pass, then yes, you will be it'll be allowed to net against the EIM area requirement, which means we may not need to buy as much flexible ramp at all to meet the EIM area. So it behooves BANC and everybody else to come in and pass those tests, because now then we're reducing the amount of flexible ramp needs we need to have to meet the overall EIM area flexible need, and net load changes for the EIM area. Now, the other thing, as I said, is if you fail that test, is now what happens to the resources regarding the flexible ramp? Well, those resources, the way the market is going to procure it, your resources are first going to meet your flexible ramp need, and then it'll be used to see if it can meet any of the EIM area flexible ramp needs. Now, if we've limited the direction in which you can provide transfer capability, we now limit the ability for your resources to provide flexible ramp awards to solve the EIM area requirement. So for most cases, and it doesn't always occur, is that if you fail the flexible ramp up, your resources mainly going to be used, or primarily going to be used, to meet your need, and unless you have transfer out capability, it's not going to meet any of the EIM area need. But it also means that the flex ramp down, since you can't have any import coming in for sure, then your resources, in essence, flex ramp down is going to meet only the downward requirement. So it has a market implication on how the market is going to assess who to award what capacity to, and what prices to use. Because when it comes to your uncertainty award, if you are awarded flexible ramp up to meet your need as well as an EIM area need, then that resource is going to get paid the flexible ramp price, for opportunity cost price in essence, for providing upward capability in your balancing authority area, plus the capability to meet the EIM area, so the opportunity cost to meet the EIM area's requirement. But if you don't have, if you're only being used for your balancing authority area, then your flexible ramp price is only going to reflect your requirement opportunity cost. And what I mean by the opportunity cost is, and we'll go into it a little bit on this point, is let's go into why do we have the product. Okay, we have forecasted net load change. All right, we've got to meet that net load change, and you guys all know this. Is at certain hours a day we have now pretty much two peaks that we have to meet. And the first peak we have is very high ramping up, and then at the end of the day you have a very high ramping down. Well, we have to have resources in position to meet that ramping capability. Now, as our resources get more complex, I'm going to use the word because as we get the resource mix has more solar, wind, and renewable and integrated within it, we have to start managing these resources to meet these flexible needs more closely. And that's actually one of the reasons why we had the product. Is as we have reliance on more renewable, you're going to have resources set in a position to meet these ramping conditions when, I don't know, the wind dies down and solar takes over. When solar dies down at the end of the day and you're waiting for the wind to come on, you're going to have resources in position to meet the ramp net load change. So what we did is we created this product. It's going to first look at what is the net load change, and then it's also what could the possibilities be. And I refer to this a lot of times as kind of like a hurricane. As you're getting farther out and they start predicting where that hurricane's going to go, they always show the hurricane path going down the center, and then they have this big bubble around. As you can see, is when they're with that hurricane path, the bubble is always smaller as you're in that interval in which or closer to the interval which you're at. It's a real-time interval. But the intervals farther out, you have much more uncertainty as to, is this the correct path? So what we're doing is that in essence is the path of the hurricane is what I call the forecasted line. That's where I'm expecting it to go. Now, the uncertainty or the bubbles around the hurricane is the upper limit and the lower limit. This is our uncertainty requirement. And so what we do is we say we're in interval T. You're going to hear different discussions as to T or T minus 1, but in this particular, it means the same thing. It's just which interval you consider it when you're talking about it. But from a settlements perspective, we will always see it as T and T plus 1. So I'm in interval T. I'm looking to T plus 1. I'm seeing that my net load is going to change. I see it forecasted to change up from the second dot from the bottom to the third dot, okay? But I need to make sure that I have procured enough resources to meet not only that net load change, I also need to be able to procure it to meet the change up to the fourth bullet, which is the upper limit. That's the flexible ramp up requirement. Now, flexible ramp down requirement, you would think maybe it's the second bullet down to the first bullet, but actually no, it's from the forecasted limit bullet down to the lower limit, because we're expecting the resources, that load to go there. We're going to align market dispatches to meet this forecasted. But what if the demand curve is significantly less when we get to that interval? I need to be able to shut down resources in order to meet my lower limit. So we are now going to procure flexible ramp down capacity to meet the difference between the forecasted limit and the lower limit. We will procure energy for uncertainty, go from the forecasted limit to the upper limit. And that difference between the net system demand and the forecasted, that's a forecasted movement. Because this is going to be where we position the resources in the multi-interval optimization to say, I'm here now, this is where I expect to be in interval t plus 1. So I've forecasted that the resources is already going to move, and therefore I've already met some of my upward requirement in this particular condition. So there's a little definition I have there of what the forecast movement and uncertainty is, so I kind of went into it. So uncertainty is forecast error, to be honest. So we're trying to make sure that, you know, in essence, when we solve for the market, that BANC has enough resources in position to meet its own forecasted net load change, plus any forecast error, whether it's our forecast error or your forecast error. We're still going to build requirements saying, in the past, under these type of conditions, we have seen this uncertainty, so we are now going to create a requirement and we're going to procure resources to meet it. Excuse me, I'm going to cough for a sec. I'm going to go on mute. Okay, so I was trying to go into a little bit what forecast movement is versus uncertain capacity. Now, I did a little bit on high level, but in essence, well, forecasted movement, which is charge code 7070, it is going to be payment or charges of the energy that is going from your binding to your advisory interval. So if I'm in hour ending 1 and the market has done its optimization, it's going to give you a binding award, but it's also going to give you several advisory awards, because this resource that I've given the award to may have, based upon its bid, have the ability and economically viable to go from 100 megawatts to 150 megawatts by interval, I'm going to do the third A. So at that point, I'm going to look to see what was the binding interval, megawatts, let's say to 100, and the first advisory interval. Well, based on your ramping, I'm going to say it went to 115. Well, now you have 15 megawatts of forecasted movement. Well, if that is in the direction of the net load change, you are helping meet the flexible ramp up need to meet that upper limit, because you are going in the direction of the forecasted net load change, and therefore we don't need to buy as much flexible ramp up. However, again, if that demand curve doesn't show up, the demand doesn't show up in the T plus 3, you actually are in a position to have an over generation. We have too much generation, so therefore I may have to go out and buy flexible capacity down, either from you or some other resources, in order to meet my flexible ramp down requirement. Now, as you can see, that has to go to what is advisory to binding. That's the uncertainty. I'm predicting you're going to be needed for that resource to be at 115, but once we get to that interval, I see that, no, I should have held you at 100. So now I have to go out and buy 15 megawatts of uncertainty. And then we're predicting what that is based on historic. And so we are going to award resources based upon their forecasted movement, but then you have the explicit uncertainty awards. And these are resources. The uncertainty award is going to be holding back of capacity for meeting the uncertainty requirement between the net load forecast and the upper limit, or flex ramp down is between the load forecast and the lower limit, we basically are holding you back or reserving you when you could have been economically dispatched for energy. So when we do that, we are determining what the price is. So flexible ramp up price is that opportunity cost between the marginal unit that provided flexible ramp and the marginal unit that provided energy, in essence. If you had a $35 bid and you're the marginal unit and the price was $42 in essence, then I have a $7 opportunity cost. Well, this resource was held back. It was economic to dispatch it for energy, but because of its flexible ramping ability, we said, no, we want to hold you back for potential uncertainty needs in the future intervals. So now I'm going to pay you that opportunity cost for that 15 megawatts that I may have held you back instead of dispatching you for energy. Now, that sets the opportunity cost for up. Similar situation for down. Now, when it comes to forecasted movement, as I was saying, is this resource is forecasted to move. This resource is expected to go 15 megawatts. Depending upon what the eventual demand forecast is, I have to pay that resource for going in the direction or helping me resolve uncertainty up. But I also need to charge this resource for potentially causing a need for the flexible ramp down. So therefore, flexible ramp forecast movement, it's a payment or charge. And the reason why I put it as payment or charge, it really depends upon two things. One is the direction of the forecasted movement in relationship to the net load, and then what the flexible ramp opportunity costs are. You know, if you're going in the direction of the net load and you have forecasted movement up, more times than not, you will have an opportunity cost for flexible ramp up, but not necessarily an opportunity cost for flexible ramp down. And therefore, you should get a payment for this forecast movement because you're helping to resolve the net load change. If you are in an interval where the net load is going down and your resource is showing the forecasted movement up, you're actually one of the resources that are requiring us to buy more flexible ramp down. So therefore, it may be in that particular interval you get charged, because the opportunity cost we have is we have to hold some resources back for the for providing downward capability in future intervals instead of allowing them to be dispatched down now. And so for a resource going the opposite direction of the net load, he's more than likely going to get a charge for this particular charge code. Now, the resources that will get the forecasted movement payment or charge are going to be generation and intertie schedule, because they participate in both 15-minute and the RTD market. Now, load does not participate in the 15-minute and the 5-minute, the dispatch market. What we use is demand forecast. So whoever I've paid or charged, in essence, I've calculated all my forecasted movement. I now have to allocate that. We allocate it to load. And currently the way we're doing the allocation is the EIM measure demand, because the forecasted movement is not only for your load change, but you also for the entire EIM area net load change. Any questions on this? Okay. I'm going to move on to uncertainty up and uncertainty down. Now, I started to say earlier is uncertainty is basically error. We're trying to procure capacity to be dispatched if our forecast errors materialize. Now, if you're a resource that was held back, in the 15-minute market, and we had an opportunity cost of $3 for a flexible ramp up, you will get paid your megawatts, your held back capacity times the $3. Now in RTD, if we determine that your resource is better used for the energy instead of being held back for capacity, we will release that flexible ramp award, uncertainty award, and we will dispatch it for energy, and then you'll have a deviation settlement between RTD and FMM of your uncertainty awards. So when you're looking at these uncertainty award settlement, you may see that you got paid in one market interval, but then charged back in the RTD. And that's because your opportunity cost was going to be picked up by the energy payment you receive for being dispatched. So what I did here is I went into a little bit of basically why you have the payment for the flexible ramp capacity up, certainly, but I'm also showing you when you go to CMRI reports, if you want to find what that resource's flexible ramp up uncertainty award is, you would go to the real-time tab of CMRI reports, 15-minute, and then you would look for the capacity site that says ramp up. If you look at download that particular report for that resource and ramp up, you'll see that the CMRI report out there on the awards you receive there is also the awards that settlements receive. And this is the award that you get paid for the uncertainty award, flexible uncertainty award. And you should also have on there the price. Same with down. Okay. I think I've already covered pretty much everything I need to cover on what the awards are for flexible ramp uncertainty. Now I'm going to go back one is I also put in here where you would find the resource level movement on CMRI. I skipped that. I apologize. Now, when it comes to the uncertainty allocation, now we've talked about how you guys get paid. Now it comes into the more fun part. It comes into how do we determine who pays for the flexible ramp uncertainty? And I'm going to refer to it as a two-tier allocation. It's not really a two-tier, but it's a distributed allocation. So what we'll do is, what Settlements does is we calculate how much of your flexible ramp was awarded for your balancing authority area. In this case, let's say it's with flexible ramp up. And then how much of the flexible ramp was awarded or used to resolve the EIM area. Okay, once I determine what the total flexible ramp uncertainty costs are, we then have to determine who we have to allocate it to. And what we use is we call this category uncertainty megawatts. And it's based on historically, what was the uncertainty? We determine how much of the uncertainty requirement is associated with supply changes, intertie changes, and load deviation. And we will calculate what that percentage is for up as well as down. And so when we have this cost, let's say it's $1,000, and I go and allocate it into these buckets, I'm going to say what percentage of the total uncertainty is associated with supply, what percentage is associated with intertie, what percentage is associated with load. And then from there, we will further allocate that down. Once I've gotten into a bucket, I will allocate it down to resources which have contributed to the need for procuring the uncertainty. So in this case, for generation, it would be undirected imbalance energy, negative undirected imbalance energy. In other words, you're metered less than you were dispatched to, plus any uncertainty awards or megawatts that we determine from the market from that advisory to binding. We would add those together. If your UIE plus your uncertainty, flexible ramp uncertainty up, is showing that you contributed to the need for flexible ramp up uncertainty, then your resource will be charged. Same thing occurs with interties, except for we don't calculate uncertainty, we just use operational adjustments. The load is simple UIE. Now understand that these categories are going to only allow you to, are only going to allow the cost to be split either into up or down. And therefore, the allocation is going to be appropriate to that. So if based on our uncertainty, I see that the supply and interties are the contributors to the uncertainty up a requirement, then only supply and intertie schedules will be allocated those costs. Load would be associated with the down at that point. So we are looking to see which deviations in essence are causing the need for uncertainty requirements. And then load, when we do have an allocation to the load group, it's allocated for unrestricted imbalance energy. Now, I know that some of you guys have seen this, and is on T+3, or we may have to see this with the market settlement timeline, T+9, is we may not have load meters yet. So what we should have an allocation of load UIE to the load resources. I didn't have a UIE. So we have a secondary backup neutrality allocation, and that's to measure demand. And so whatever is not allocated through these buckets gets allocated out through measure demand. Now, the anticipation is that that eventually we will get the actual uncertainty of the UIE, and therefore the allocation will be to the correct party. Now, the only other time that we have this need for this neutrality or this backup is if all the categories categories show that they're all going in one direction. They're all for flexible ramp up, but I still had to buy flexible ramp down. So therefore, we are going to allocate that to measure demand. Now, I started to say earlier is we determine what the costs are for your balancing authority area versus EIM. Now, when I do your balancing authority areas cost, that's going to be allocated only to BANC because it's to resolve BANC's flexible ramp requirement. If your resource was procured to resolve the EIM area flexible ramp requirement, then all the BAAs are going to share in paying for that requirement. So we actually will separate that flexible ramp uncertainty awards payment into what is your balancing authority area and what's for EIM. And we will allocate it accordingly. Now, as part of this, though, we had carried over something from the original flexible ramp product, and that is the monthly resettlement. And that's why I call it the third tier allocation. So basically, what it's designed to do is that in any one given day, we didn't want to penalize specific resources or specific areas, all of that uncertainty cost. Because it could have just been, he was the unlucky resource to be moving in the opposite direction or be moving in the direction that the cost should be allocated. So what we did is we created a resettlement of the allocation only. And so we'll reverse out all the daily allocations and we reallocate at the end of the month. And how we did it is we're doing it to peak versus off-peak hours. Now, the mechanism is exactly the same, but what we've determined is that certain resources tend to be the contributors for that uncertainty need under the peak hours, where other resources are the tendencies for the off-peak hours. And so we kind of split this group up into those resources so that they can share the responsibility for the flexible ramp uncertainty procurement across your balancing authority area as well as the EIM area. Now, I didn't get into it. There is a no pay when it comes to the uncertainty, but that one is, it basically is, if the resource, when I'm paying you uncertainty or forecasted movement, if your resource was expected to be at a certain megawatt at T, but when your meter got there, it shows that we're actually higher or lower than the market award, then we're going to claw back a portion of that award. And the reason being is if you've already moved, you may not have the ability to provide that same flexible ramping capability that we anticipated you to, particularly if you're a MS multi-stage generator. If your one configuration shows that you can provide 5 megawatts of ramp, but when we look at your meter, we show that you are actually in another configuration that can only provide 2 megawatts of ramp, then you couldn't meet that flexible ramp movement or the uncertainty award that you were given. So instead of trying to make the determination as to what configuration is, we basically said, if your resource has moved already in the direction of that award, then we are going to claw back that portion of the megawatts because you've already been compensated for the energy and therefore shouldn't be compensated for flexible ramp. And that's pretty much it on the relationship of the sufficiency test to the balance to settlement charge codes. On a high level, the balancing test is the only one that has a direct impact on settlements. If you pass the balancing test, you may get an allocation. That's only if someone else failed. But it actually, its mainly purpose of it is to make sure that you come in and you're not leaning on anybody else. The capacity tests are just to make sure that we have enough capacity to meet imbalance requirements, imbalance forecasts, as well as the flexible ramp is of that capacity, how much of it is 5-minute ramping capable to meet our uncertainty need as well as forecasted need. Now, there's one thing I didn't say in there, that if for some reason we have a market separation. And BANC is, in essence, separating itself from the real-time market, and it's going to have to just resolve all of its own load imbalance. The operators are basically going to have to do it. Usually it's under very unique conditions. We will automatically not apply the overscheduling, underscheduling charge, because at that point we understand that banks in the emergency condition, it has to really bear down and just worry about resolving its own reliability, and it doesn't need to worry about what the market did, and so therefore we will not assess the balancing overscheduling, underscheduling charge. Now, we'll also, when you are in a market disruption criteria, your ETSRs are locked both inward and outward. So again, you are just solving your own need. And so when we do all of our settlement, you should be, excuse me, you should be neutral amongst the charge codes within your balancing authority area. The only neutrality might occur is if we have a base ETSR or that is actually settling, and that ETSR is binding. So you may have a shared, but for the most part, you should wind up neutral. So I gave you a lot of stuff on the efficiency test and settlements. Any questions? Okay. Not hearing
again,
questions.
We're still here, James.
Okay.
You're doing a fantastic job.
I was wondering if you guys all got your coffee. I got mine.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh no, just again, thanks for covering this in some good detail. Sort of guessing this might be a little overwhelming and take some time to digest, but I think your coverage has been really good.
Yeah, I mean that's why I keep on stopping and to see if there's any questions. Because I know I'm throwing a lot of both the theory and the implementation at you, and if I've said stuff that you want me to stop and cover again, please ask, because you'll either ask now or you'll ask when it materializes during parallel. So the more we can get you understanding this now, the more comfortable you are going to be in parallel. So then you're going to be more comfortable when you get to production. I'd rather take all the hard questions now than later.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I think the other thing that we've got is this presentation to refer back to when the question does occur. So that's helpful too.
Right. And as I said, I'm recording this. Now, I'll have to figure out how to get the recording so you guys can hear it. But
so
I'm
post
recording
it to YouTube or something. It's going to be a big file.
Well, I've never done it.
Sort that out.
Yes, I've never done it, so I just know I pressed the record button.
Perfect.
All right, so now we're going on to the second topic, which is MRI settlement and the billing validation discussion. I wasn't exactly sure what specific topics you want to discuss on this, so I basically dove into what are the files. So when MRI asks for sending out the basically the files you'll see on MRS, is you're going to have statement files, you're going to have bill determinant files, and you're going to have invoices. Now, the invoices are all scheduling coordinator specific. So if you're the participating scheduling coordinator, this invoice should reflect all of your resources that are assigned to you. If you're the EIM entity, you will have all of the resources associated with you. For the all the other, I'm going to call you guys for now the sub-entities, and that would be if we do get the that other initiative going, you may go there. But for the load resources, the EIM will have resource information in it, invoicing for each of the various load areas, the CLAP areas. So it's going to be very easily to identify which costs were being allocated to Roseville versus Reading versus WAPA. And so we've, based upon our implementation discussions, that's how we've designed it for now, is that the EIM entity, in their invoice, in their scheduling coordinator statement, they will be able to have a breakdown of each trade date and each trade period, because the invoice is by trade period, that is to your particular area. And then the participating a scheduling coordinator will actually have the knowledge of what their participating resources will be associated to as well. Now, the scheduling coordinating bill determinant file. Now, this file is all the resource-specific information or SC-specific information for that particular scheduling coordinator. Now, so if I set up a schedule coordinator ID that is participating schedule coordinator that's just BANC. BANC is going to have their generation information in this file that's only BANC. I mean, sorry, BANC, I meant WAPA. It's only WAPA. That way WAPA can see all of its resources, but they won't see everybody else's resources. And they will see what their resources awards were, what the meter values that we received were, what the UIE that calculated for it, what was the IIE, all of that is going to be within that scheduling coordinator bill determinant file. These bill determinant files give you all the information on how the ISO calculated your trade date statements. Your trade date statements will then tell you what your invoice is going to be. So they kind of roll up together. Now, as I said, the information contained is all SC specific. You will have, unfortunately, there are some charge codes which are SC allocated or SC assigned, and those will be, they won't have as much detail other than what the SC allocation is. Other than that, it's all your real-time charge codes, your BCR charge codes, all that should be resource specific. It's just some of the allocations will be SC specific instead of resource specific. The last ones are the balancing authority area file. Now, these are the ones, when you go and look on MRIS, they'll have, I believe it's BAA-CISO and then bill determinant file. This all used to be one file called CISO bill determinant file. What we had a request for is how to break it out into each balancing authority areas. Information that can be, that everybody can see, but it's basically associated with your balancing authority area. An example of this would be your total BCR cost that was paid to the resources within BANC. Well, that total cost gets allocated to the EIM entity, but if you want to know what your total BCR cost is, then you go into this bill determinant file. You could actually find it there. You also wanted to know if you got any costs from another balancing authority area. You can also find this in here as well, because you will see the bill determinant says BCR cost to your area. Or if you had costs going to another balancing authority area, you could see this is from your balancing authority area. If you wanted to see where that cost went, you can get that information too, because now you actually can download their balancing authority area files as well. And you would just have to link it up. You would take each balancing authority area's BCR cost from And then you'll see that's allocated to the balancing authority areas too, and that's going to be based upon their transfers. But that's what these files did, is allow you the opportunity for mainly to focus on your balancing authority areas. But if you wanted to find additional information of costs and allocations into other balancing authority areas, that you can find it, but it won't be down to a resource level. It'll be at an aggregate level, and this aggregate level gives no confidentiality information away. It just says these are the costs. These are the costs of this balancing authority area. This is how it's going to be allocated. You will see this when you want to do your validation of real-time imbalance energy offset and real-time congestion offset. A real big one is going to be congestion offset, and I'll talk about that one in a little bit. But that's basically what these files are for. One is, I don't want, if it is, the resource is information, I have to maintain confidentiality. So I can only give that resource-specific information to the scheduling coordinator because they are the entity that is participating on behalf of that resource. I can't share that with everybody else. What I can is when I roll that information up into a level where it is allocated to or distributed to a group of people, I can tell you what the total cost is for the entire area, but just not that resource information. So that's what these build determinant files do. It separates the SCs from the BAA level build determinants. But all of this information together tells you the story of how the ISO charged and paid resources as well as allocated costs, so like neutrality. So was there any other specific information here that we wanted to know?
Hey, James, this is Kelly with Reading.
Hi, Kelly.
Can you hear me? Hi. So when I'm looking at the KISO build determinant in MRIS, I don't see one specific for Reading for our SCID. I see BANC and I see several other entities. Should we be seeing one specific to us, or would we only see it under BANC?
Did you set up? Did we set up a scheduling coordinator ID for Reading?
Yes.
I don't think we did. We did?
Yeah, we have one for EIM. Yeah, it's RDG2.
Yeah, there should be a Reading EIM PRSC ID, and like Kelly said, RDG, the number 2, RDG2.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, you should see a scheduling SC specific RC Reading SC file, and you're not seeing that?
No. I think that's where my question came up. I wasn't sure where to validate that because I was thinking I was supposed to be pulling banks and somehow figuring out ours, you know, within BANC.
This makes the question a lot more interesting. Yeah, it becomes a very good question.
Yeah, so we need to go and look at the MRIS, and I can see if I can have access.
Well, Kelly, if you don't mind, why don't you open a quick city ticket, and it'll go to James pretty quickly. That'll keep it on his queue. Okay,
perfect.
Yeah,
Will do.
Because that means you've not been able to validate anything.
Well, and I don't know, maybe it's operator error because our shadow settlements are coming in and they've got determinants. And so that's what I was trying to go into our vendor software and figure out, well, how do I validate, you know, the determinants that they're using against what the ISO shows. But then when I go to MRIS to try to pull that file, you know, I was only seeing BANC.
Okay. Yeah, we need
to.
And it may be a permission thing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when I'm in here, I'm in MRIS now. I can see, you know, I can select the file type built determinants, but under like the SCID, it's just gray. It doesn't allow me to select anything specific or the run type. It just lists, everything that's available within the date range.
All right, so we'll do two things. I think we'll have time. I mean, we're going through this pretty fast, so we have time at the end of the day or another period where I can set up another call, and I'll get a file open to see if I can find it and see if I can see it and you can't see it. It's a security issue. It's a certificate issue.
Okay.
And so can I ask you a question then? Do you see BANC scheduling coordinator, the entities?
I can see, I see BANC, I see LADWP, Nevada, PACE, PGE, I see several different ones.
Yeah, those are the BAA common files. Are you seeing any SC files?
No.
Okay. All right, so that's what we need to check on is why you're not seeing any of the SC files. So, all right, I'll bring in, I'll bring in Indu and a couple other the IT people.
All right, thank you.
And we'll get this resolved quickly then.
Parallel with that, Kelly, maybe you could send an email to your UAA to have them check what access they granted you for MRIS settlements. That would be good information to know when we start troubleshooting this.
Yes.
Yeah. Is anybody else having this problem?
Becomes a great question, Kelly. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, well, this is an excellent question. Okay, so no one else is having this problem, then it gives us an area to focus. If Western or Roseville or anybody else is having this issue, please let me know so that I can troubleshoot everybody at once. My concern is that we have a crossing of certificates, and I need to see what's going on.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Hi, this is Mija from Roseville. I haven't checked with my team yet, but I am actually not able to see any bill determinant files. All I see is meter data.
That might also be a permission.
Yeah, because that's the meter that's the meter MRS metering. Yeah. Okay. Good. So I will reach out and I get to give Eamon some work. Yay!
Excellent.
I just checked with my team members and no one sees it either.
Okay. Then I got to find out what's going on then. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll get onto that today. So I know we've anything else on the bill determinant files other than you can't see it, so you can't really ask too many questions about them.
Hi, this is Brenda with ACES.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I just wanted to let you know, and also Roseville, I do see the billing determinants with my access for Rose.
Okay.
Good. I think this might be an access allocation thing that we'll have to work through carefully, but thank you, Brenda. That helps.
Yeah. It's narrowing it down.
Hey, Jeff, this is Donnie.
Hey, Donnie, how are you?
Pretty good. Hey, so I had that issue yesterday, as what Kelly was saying. And after talking to Simon and Amy, I had to use a different cert that Amy set up. So I don't know if this helps them, but after I tried that other cert, we call it a BANC EIM cert, I believe, it worked for me in MRIS. So I had to use a different cert that Amy set up for me. So I don't know what you guys have to do on your ends, but I'm just letting you know what I had to do to figure it out yesterday.
Okay, yeah, that actually helps. because it sounds like there's a link that instead of giving you a separate certificate, you're having a link between the bank cert and these files. Yeah, that does help a lot. All right, so I've noted these. I've got a direction where to go to find out what's going on. So I will probably reach out to various people, Kelly, you'll be one, to see if we get that resolved. But yeah, please, and everybody, I mean, each area that is not seeing it, put a city ticket in. That way, I'm going to try to handle it all at once, but if I, for some reason, I miss an area or I miss a certificate, I at least will have a reference back to it. And I'll tell Eamon to expect these. So I know it's 10:30. I have one more area. Do you guys want to take a quick break?
How about real quick, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most, 10 minutes, come back at 10:40?
Yeah, let's do it 10:40, we'll start back up.
We'll start at 10:40 prompt.
Sounds good. So I'm going to put the recorder on pause.
Thanks, James.
Well, thank you.
Hey, silly, but probably helpful. Is there a way you could add to this slide, edit the slide to say we'll be back at 10:40 in case people didn't hear this?
Sure.
It's on the question slide right now being displayed.
Yep. Yep, I will insert a slide and come right back.
Thanks, James.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye. All right. So this wasn't part of the requested topic, but I wanted to go over real-time market offsets, the offset charge codes. And the reason why I wanted to go over it, you guys probably, I think Jeff, you dove into it already, I'm guessing, is that everybody seems to have questions on this once we start getting parallel. Where are the costs coming from? How do we allocate, particularly the congestion? And what is the need for these offsets? So I wanted to do a high level what the need are, and then go into how we calculate and how we allocate. You know, if you have already been diving into these things, this will probably be a refresher. But I think the key area is really going to be the congestion offset. I know that at the last EIM quarterly meeting, we've had, I think, 3 quarterly meetings where we've gone over these offsets, and I think it's always good to cover them quickly before going to parallel. Now, what is the purpose of the offset? Okay, the purpose is to basically bring my real-time charge codes back into a neutral state. Now, how do we get into a non-neutral state? Is when I am paying generation and import, charging exports, depending on whatever the settlement is in the 15-minute market, instructed imbalance energy charge codes, and the RTD instructed imbalance energy charge codes, it's designed, those dispatches are designed to meet a demand forecast. Well, we are directly paying the generation imports and exports. However, the load, on the other hand, is calculated or settled from the meter back to its base schedule. So when the market is resolving it, if the meter doesn't equal the demand forecast, I automatically have a little bit of an imbalance. Now, some of that imbalance is resolved through operational adjustments, and some of it's resolved through uninstructed imbalanced energy. But there are other elements in there that have created an automatic separation every 5 minutes. And where it comes from, some of it is pricing differentials. The other one is meter granularity differentials. So at every 5 minutes, the resource generator is being dispatched. Interties, if they are updated based upon their pre-hour schedules, you're going to see dispatches or awards for every the 15-minute market for interties and generation, and then generation mainly for the RTD. Now, there's a settling at 5-minute LMP. Now, when we get the meter value, generation should be still at a 5-minute. Interties, they can either be 15 or hourly values that have been broken down into or distributed across the 12 intervals of that hour. For if it's 15, it'd be the 3 for that 15-minute interval. If it's hourly, it's 12. So I have, at that point, I have generation that may be meeting an export. My generation may show that in one 5-minute interval, it was a 12 megawatt incremental injection of supply supporting an export tag, but that 12 megawatt export tag may get spread over the intervals in which you have reflected the tag. Now, if it's 15 minutes, only 3 intervals. If it's an hour, it could potentially be the whole hour. So what this can cause is the operational adjustments associated with that intertie may show some fluctuations throughout the hour, and the pricing differential between the supply and the export may be different. Now, that's not the big one. The big one is load. Now, load, what we did in order to resolve some of this pricing separation, we created this real-time hourly lap price. Now, this is a weighted average price. And how we calculate it is we look at the difference between your load days or base schedule and your 15-minute forecast, and then the difference between the 15-minute forecast and the RTD forecast. We use this difference to weight how much that price should be used in calculating the real-time market hourly lap price. And the reason why we do that is most load is when it is submitted as an hourly value that is distributed across the 12 intervals. When we're trying to weight those intervals, each of the 5-minute intervals, so that we can narrow the separation between what we pay the generator and charge the load. What this causes is situations where I have an under-collection of money to pay the generators and supply, in essence, or an over-collection. And now if I have an under-collection, what I'm going to do is find out who has to pay more in order to pay that generation. And what we're going to do when we do the over-collection, I'm going to distribute it to those balancing authority areas because I've over-collected from them. Now, how we're going to do this collection or distribution is we broke it down into its parts. We have the energy portion, which is a system margin energy cost. That's a real-time imbalance energy offset. You have your congestion offset, well, that's for the marginal cost of congestion, and then you have your marginal cost of losses offset. Now, the marginal cost of losses is pretty straightforward. It is for that balancing area for BANC, what we will do is we will calculate all of the instructed and uninstructed loss amounts for BANC. And so we'll do UIE, we do UFE, we do FMM IAE, RTDIE based on its relevant marginal loss component of the LMP at that nodal location. And when I sum that up or net that all up for your balancing authority area, whatever is under collected or over collected tells me that I have to distribute it or collect more from the EIM entity. If my losses, in essence, show that I've under collected what I've paid, then I'm going to collect more from the entity. If I've over collected, I'm going to pay it back to the entity. Now, that's the first one for, I thought I clicked this slide. For ISO, what we do is we allocate it to measure demand, in essence. We have various components. It's measure demand less ETCs and TORs, and if you're in MSS, then it's going to be your MSS aggregate net measure demand. So that's who gets allocated in the ISO balancing authority area. In your balancing authority area, we're going to do it to the EIM entity. And the reason why we do it to the EIM entity is these are neutrality costs that we think that the OAT should determine how this is collected from your participants. So we'll allocate to the entity, and the entity allocate out for the OAT. Now, the more difficult one is the real-time congestion offset, because it's broken down into two elements. First is, like marginal cost of losses, I have to determine how much congestion neutrality I have in your balancing authority area. And how I calculate that is I will take my, same with losses, I'll take my FMM IAE, RTD IAE, my balance energy by the relevant total marginal cost of congestion. Okay? This tells me how much congestion neutrality is materializing in your balancing authority area. Okay? We use this and the marginal cost of losses total when calculating the real-time imbalance energy offset. However, this just tells me, this total congestion tells me how much materialized in your area. It doesn't tell me that I need to collect it from your balancing authority area. What we need to do is we need to look at the marginal cost of congestion breakdown. And I'll go into a little more what the difference between the total cost and the breakdown is. But what we are going to do is I'm going to do that same calculation I did for the total cost of congestion, but instead of doing it at the total MCC, I'm going to do it at the marginal cost of congestion breakdown prices. Now, if you remember, I talked about the BAA bill determinant file. Well, when you're looking at the total marginal cost of congestion, you will find that for every node in your BAA bill determinant file. If you want to see what the breakdown of that node is for each BAA, then you would have to open up each BAA's bill determinant file, find that node, and you can say, okay, my congestion of, let's say, $500 shows that 100 is for BANC, 200 is ISO, 100 is Turlock, and then miraculously there's another 100 that's I think I got that right. So 200 that is Nevada. Okay, somehow you're resolving congestion in Nevada's balancing authority area as well. So I'm now going to take every megawatt associated with that particular node, and I'm going to multiply it by that breakdown, because that tells me how much of your neutrality belongs in that other balancing authority area. they are the one I'm going to either have to collect it from or I'm going to pay back to. So we do this for every resource and every nodal location. Now, how we do those calculations, how we add it up, all those calculations are available for view in the bill determinant files, the BA bill determinant files. You'll see that your megawatts are this, here is the breakdown price, and then it'll give you what your total congestion neutrality allocation imbalance is. So I could have 10,000 megawatts or $10,000 of neutrality imbalance in BANC, but only collect 2,000 from BANC itself. The other 8,000 is from the other balancing authority areas. And that's because when we're doing the allocation based upon the breakdown, we're looking to see who is responsible for the congestion. This is, in essence, a lot of it's congestion rent. So what we look for, what causes it, is you have to look at what is congestion which is internal, what is congestion that is external, and what is congestion that is shared. That is what the market determines when it's trying to calculate the marginal cost congestion breakdown. If it is internal to BANC, then in the breakdown prices, you will see that the BAA would be for BANC, and this would be your congestion price. If it is external, you'd be something like, let's say, the Arizona one, which was $200. It would say Arizona when they would have a congestion price of $200. If it is shared, let's say it's a shared cost between BANC and Turlock, TID. That would mean that the ETSR between your two areas is binding, and therefore every megawatt that's associated with that binding constraint is shared 50-50. So we'll calculate up, and let's say we had $600 of congestion or so, and that $600 should be shared 50-50. Well, 300 of it then winds up in BANC's BA, 300 winds up in Turlock's BA. So this is how we determine who is responsible for that congestion. Now, when we're done, if you add up the marginal cost congestion breakdown price, it should equal your total congestion. So all we're doing is I'm going to end up taking that total congestion neutrality that I identified in your balancing authority area, and I'm going to distribute it to the balancing authority areas that are responsible for that congestion based upon that breakdown pricing. Now, when we get to that point when I determine how much is now the neutrality that has to be distributed, whether it's or collected or paid back, then I'm going to do it based upon either to the entity, if it's in the EIM, BAAs, or if it's ISO, it's going to be to measure demand less ETCs and TORs again. So that's usually where I usually get some questions. So I'm going to stop here real quickly.
Hi, James. This
Hello.
is Jonas.
Hey, Jonas.
How's it going? How are you?
I'm fine. Yourself?
I'm doing good, thanks. I have a question regarding these congestion.
Yep.
Are there situations where, like, for example, for the second bullet point for the congestion external to BA that affects, our BA, for example, let's say BANC, are there any situation wherein there isn't any other BA that is going to relieve the congestion in BANC BA?
Yeah. So a lot of it is going to be dependent on a couple things. Let's say you have a load pocket, and that load pocket can only be resolved by internal generation. That would be internal congestion. So that generator, if it's only resolving that particular low pocket need, and it doesn't resolve any other congestion constraints, then that resource's total congestion, marginal cost congestion, will say bank. That means I'm resolving this load pocket's need. This load pocket's needs congestion price should only be bank. My generation should only be bank. So if it's perfectly aligned, then I don't have any neutrality. But if I have anything that's offset, then it's going to be allocated to bank.
Okay. I have a follow-up question, but it's not that one. But thanks for that. How about is this something like for a separation? Is that something that is also considered in this?
Oh yeah. So if you have a market separation, there is power balance constraint becomes a little bit of an issue until I fix the asymmetric wheeling, which should go in when you guys go live. But for the most part, when you have a separation, you are resolving internal congestion because your generation is moving to meet your load, and therefore, when you first get the pricing, it used to be that you would have some unusual marginal cost congestion, and we have to go in and fix it. We do a price correction based upon that. But with the market settlement timeline, that market price correction should be performed before we even do a statement. So what you will see is all the congestion for that internal generation should meet the congestion for your demand. There might be some odd circumstances because part of the market separation is we look to see what was your, like the balancing the flex test, what is the most limiting constraint at the ETSRs. And if you have a base ETSR that has a change between base schedules and final, well, that can cause some congestion to shift between the balancing authority areas, as well as if you had previously been importing in at 100 megawatts, we're going to typically lock you at that, initially at that ETSR direction, and then bring you back to zero. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so this might sound dumb then. How is that going to look in the breakdown prices for each BAA? For example, we're in for that hour, you know that you have a market separation.
So for the most part, you should have, your breakdown price should mainly be your balancing authority areas, but you may have some minor costs or breakdowns which shows between bank and ISO and bank and TID.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of, is there's a reason why it would go all the way out to farther than that? I mean, it could, but really it's because ETSR is binding at that point. You can't be resolving external congestion, so it shouldn't be there.
Shouldn't be in there, but then there will be some, like what you said, minor. So there will be that neutrality allocation that will happen with that minor or small prices coming from other breakdowns, right?
Yeah, that can happen, yes. Because what happens is, and this is part of it, is when you're separated, you automatically create in the market a power balance constraint violation. We basically have a price separation between your balancing authority area and the rest of EIM. Now, that can have some bleeding effect, I'm going to use the word, based upon the constraints relationships, especially at the intertie locations between bank and the other balancing authority areas, but it should not be significant. What I have seen in the past is that when we've had, when Nevada or so on has had a market separation, it's been less than $10,000. So it really
Okay.
isn't a significant amount. It just can happen. And we're hoping that, I'm not hoping, I believe that the resolution of the asymmetric wheeling problem is going to resolve some of that even further. And for those
Okay.
who, have you guys, I don't know if anybody's been following the asymmetric wheeling issue, is if you, and SMUD hasn't had to deal with this, and BANC wouldn't have to deal with it except you have TID. What it is energy gets injected into the EIM area, all right, at one balancing authority area. That energy, in essence, goes through one or more other balancing authority areas and exports out into another non-EIM area. Well, they use the base ETSR to reflect that transfer of energy between the two balancing authority, two or more balancing authority areas. Well, if they choose to settle that that base ETSR, and one of the balancing authority area has a power balance constraint violation, means they have a separation in essence between the energy prices of the two BAAs. The calculation of the financial location causes a cost shift of that energy, that the price separation, congestion separation, to move from one balancing authority area to another. So if you are the third party, if your customer was the person who had the wheel through, you would possibly get paid $30 for importing the energy and charged $500 for leaving the EIM area. But you didn't cause any of the congestion. What caused the congestion was internal congestion within the balancing authority area that you may have been leaving. So what we're doing is we're rectifying that. We're no longer creating this financial price that does 50% from the D-gap of one BAA and 50% of the D-gap of the other BAA to come up with a financial location price. We're actually going to settle the base ETSR changes as if they were intertie schedules, straight intertie schedules that are out on the market. So that should resolve any of this price separation issue when it comes to base ETSR.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
That goes in at the time you guys go live. So
yeah,
we'll hopefully have that all resolved.
Okay.
Any other questions? Now, I was expecting one more, but what I was expecting was, how do you determine the breakdown? Well, that one, if you want to shadow how did you calculate the breakdown, you're going to have to pull in all the constraints, and then you're going to have to pull in the shift factors from those constraints to each nodal location. And then you would have to use that constraint price times that shift factor to that nodal location to say this is how much cost belongs to from that constraint to this nodal location. But you will also need to know, what is that constraint, an internal constraint? Is it external constraint, or is it a shared constraint? And for, the ETSR would be your only shared constraint. Now, so it's not easy to shadow the marginal cost of congestion breakdown pricing that the market does. You can be done, and I do know of a couple BAs that have done it. It took them a long time to do it, but it can be done. Now, when you're calculating the if you want to shadow the calculation of the marginal cost congestion breakdown versus your total breakdown, we don't calculate the breakdown at each nodal location. My settlement system calculates it and sums it up to a BA. We do it one quick swoop right through. But I do have the ability to prove that at a specific nodal location, based upon the instructed imbalance energy and UIE and all that stuff, that times that breakdown will result in these costs. I've done it for balancing authority areas in the past. If we need to, we can go through that, but understand that it does work, and it does calculate what the cost should be. Okay, so once we've done the marginal cost of loss, we've collected or distributed the neutrality imbalance for losses. We've done it for the congestion from your balancing authority area. All that's left is the energy. Okay, so what we'll do is we take all of our settlement charge codes. All our settlement charge codes is settle up the LMP, which is energy plus congestion plus losses. And we'll add all that together, and then we'll subtract out what we've already collected from the marginal cost of losses. We will subtract out your total congestion that we calculated because that was collected through the congestion offsets. And then we come into, now this is your real-time imbalance energy. This is your initial imbalance for energy within your balancing authority area. But we're not done yet. We have to now account for the ETSR, because although we don't officially settle most of the ETSRs, the dynamic and static, that energy, as it's transferring from one balancing authority area to another, actually has a cost to it. And if I don't account for that cost, I'm going to be collecting or paying the entity of that BA more than I should. And a good example would be if BANC's generation was dispatched 10 megawatts to resolve ISO load imbalance of 10 megawatts. When I calculate everything based upon energy, if my energy price is $25, then I show, if I don't account for the ETSR, I show that BANC got paid $250 more than it should. I need to go collect it. Well, where that collection actually is in the ISO balancing authority area. I've already collected that there. I don't want to pay back to the ISO. I actually want to show that these two, when they're added together, are now neutral. So we actually calculate the financial value of the ETSR. Now, this is a financial accounting calculation only. This is, you know, when you're looking at your spreadsheet, your balance sheet, and you want to show what's going from one account to another, it's basically you're putting in a financial transaction to show that this goes from a loss to an expense, you know, expense to a loss. I mean, however you want to put it. So what I do is we calculate the financial value of the ETSR at each location, and it's going to be, actually we do it at the BAA level, and we do it as the net transfer out for each market or in at the system marginal energy price. That tells me how much energy left your balancing authority area or came in. Now, under that scenario I just talked about, we had the megawatts for transferring between BANC and ISO. Calculating a financial value of that export should bring BANC into a zero settlement. I calculate the import into the ISO, should bring my neutrality settlement to zero. I have nothing to allocate. However, when I'm doing this, it's going to it's going to financially account for the ETSRs, which then correctly shifts the cost to the balancing authority area that I have to collect that offset amount from. Now, the third bullet in there, you guys don't have to worry about because you're within California. But, excuse me, if you were in Nevada, Arizona, I would also have to account for the fact that that ETSR could have greenhouse gas associated with it. And what I mean is, if that transfer shows that I have some of that transfer is going to ISO, but some of it's also going to another balancing authority area that's outside of California, I have to account for that energy that's going to another balancing authority area by applying the greenhouse gas price. Because that generator's going to get paid the LMP, which includes the greenhouse gas, and then it's going to sync to a load that also includes that greenhouse gas price. Now, when it comes to ISO, we've already accounted for that by accounting for the greenhouse gas obligation settlement. And what that is we've compensated the generator for that greenhouse gas obligation. That price is embedded in the ISO LMP, or in the California LMP. I'm going to rephrase that. And what I mean is California area LMP, which would be BANC, LA, DWP will be in that, Turlock will be in it. LMP is simply energy plus congestion plus loss. We don't make an adjustment for greenhouse gas. Anything outside of California, you apply the greenhouse gas component of the LMP if it is sending energy to California. So as you can see, if I'm paying a generator that, let's say the greenhouse gas component is $2, and so that's a reduction in price for that energy, I'm going to compensate that resource back $2 if it gets an obligation. But where that obligation is coming from is the fact that I've already charged it to the load in the California area. So again, this real-time imbalanced energy offset, when we allocate it, ISO balancing authority area, we do it to measure demand, less ETCs. And for EIM, we allocate it to the entity. Now that's our offset. Now these are just neutrality charge codes. A lot of people like to call them uplifts, but they're not. It's just trying to bring my real-time charge codes back into neutral because I'm going to pay the generation for what they delivered at the LMP which they delivered it. And I've got to make sure that when I've collected from my load or my demand, if I've over-collected for some reason, I need to pay back that demand. The generator is perfectly compensated. The supply is perfectly compensated on a 5-minute. So now I need to pay back the demand, or in this case will be exit entity in this case, for that over collection. If I under collect, that means I got to go and get more money, or the market itself is not, or settlements is not neutral, and we have to figure out where that money comes, where we're going to get that extra collection. So that's all these charge codes are designed to do, is to make sure that I've collected enough dollars from the area that, the demand that is consuming the energy in order to pay the supply that is providing that energy. And that's it. Any questions on the offsets? Okay. Well, I left an area in here for it's called open discussions, which means any topic that you want to talk about, if I can answer it on a theoretical, I will. If you want some details, I'll have to get it back to you. So here's a good opportunity to ask any questions. I can't be that good, guys. Okay.
Yeah, so we're still here, or at least I'm still here. I think everybody is. Would it make sense to use some of our leftover time, if nobody has any questions, to sort of break out and look into that statement issue? Are you prepared to look at that a little bit, James?
Well, I have to call people and find out, have them look at it. So I don't have the permissions to do it myself.
Okay. And I'm back to, are there any questions for James?
Yeah. How is everybody doing on the BCR? Let me ask about that one. I mean, the theory is easy. The implementation is usually the hardest, or the understanding of and validating is usually the harder part. You know, big cost recovery in theory is, if, you know, we were talking about the flexible ramp, that I would do the multi-interval optimization, and that binding interval, I'm going to dispatch a resource. Well, in that binding interval, he may not be economic, because based on my optimization in a future interval, I have determined that if the prices show up as we anticipate, as they're predicting, that over this interval horizon, that resource is going to be economic. So somewhere in those future horizons, I should make up for the fact that it was not uneconomic in that binding interval. The problem occurs is when we get to that future horizon and the demand forecast is different than we predicted it to be. So now I don't dispatch that. I don't need that. The pricing for that resources dispatch didn't materialize as we expected. So now over this window, that resource is now uneconomic. So what we look at is, for big cost recovery, we look at each resource and we look to say, what was its bid and what was the LMP? And then we look over the entire day. And we say, over the entire day, is that resource short? If it is short, then we will give it big cost recovery. We will actually pay it back to its bid. If it has excess revenue, then we consider it all good. Your daily settlement and the horizon, in essence, took care of the LMP or covered your costs, so therefore you don't get big cost recovery. Now, when you have big cost recovery, the big question then becomes is, how do you allocate it and who pays for it? All right. So what we'll do is we take the big cost recovery of the resource, and then we distribute it at the end of the day. It was short, and then there was 4 intervals throughout the day where it was uneconomic. I will take that dollars and I will put it in each of those 4 intervals in relationship to what its uneconomic status was. So if I have more, if it was more uneconomic in the first interval than the last one, I'm going to put more cost into that first one. And then from there, I determine who gets the allocation. If in that interval you are importing across the ETSRs, then all of that cost goes to the entity. However, if in those intervals you are exporting out, that means this generator's, the reason why we dispatch could have been to serve not just only internal, it could have been external. We don't know for sure. So we created what's called a BCR transfer mechanism. And what we currently do, and actually, I'm not even talking what we currently do because it's not going to be there when you guys go live. So what we're going to do, and it's embedded within the base schedule initiative that is going to go live when you go live, is we calculate how much of that BCR should be transferred out. And how we're going to calculate it is we take the transfer out, net transfer out of your balancing authority or ETSR, and we divide it by net transfer out plus measured demand. Whatever that percentage is, we say that percentage of cost gets shifted to another balancing authority area. And the reason why we're switching to measured demand is because it now accounts for those situations where the market is, during its reoptimization, the demand didn't change, but the resource mix changed. You know, based upon the bids, I may have decked one resource in one area and inked another, and based on economics, we say, okay, now, oh, darn, my decking of this resource made it uneconomic. I still need to recover it. It serves some internal load, but it also might have served some external load, because all we did was shift the resources based upon their bids. So that's going to go live when BANC goes live. So if you have not looked at it already, please review. It's partially the real-time settlement review initiative and partially the base schedule initiative. Does anybody have any questions on those initiatives, or anybody looked at those initiatives? I'm guessing no questions. I'm hoping you guys looked.
A fair guess. I think put some perspective around bid cost recovery. What we experienced in market sim, at least a couple of participants that I looked at, on the day we executed the scenario, we, with the ISO's help, forced a poor economic solution on the market, which should have created bid cost recovery scenarios, but it was for a very limited time in the whole operating day. And what I saw happen with a couple of participants is that while they would have been eligible if only those couple hours were involved, some prices and dispatches in the rest of the day more than made up for that sort of short duration.
That's the unfortunate side of this one.
Yeah, we don't want to run a 24-hour scenario. That would be a headache for everybody. So for BANC folks that are not seeing bid cost recovery on the bid cost recovery day, what I've asked other people to do is look for any other trade date that got settled that has some bid cost recovery in it and evaluate that settlement. I think you will all find some. There are enough odd dispatches in map states that you will find some without looking too hard.
Yeah, and then also is when we get into parallel, that's a good time to do a lot of looking, because we are running as if you are really in the market.
Yeah, much more likely.
And so if you have any questions associated with that, let's send me a note, put a city ticket in, we'll discuss it.
Good point.
Yeah, that's always been a hard one, is to, I think at one point we did it where we forced the bid cost recovery and then we took the unit offline. And that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
But it creates the problem, is then it creates the failure of the sufficiency test. So it's a very very delicate thing to do.
Yeah. There are BANC members, you'll find there's lots of sort of false positives with bid cost recovery, lots of things where it appears your generator should be getting paid its full cost, but perhaps something one of the traders did disqualifies some of those costs. So a good example of that is if a trader committed the resource and brought it online, not the ISO dispatch. If the trader said, I need this online at 1 o'clock and did that, then that unit isn't eligible for startup cost recovery. And so while it may not make its bid back may not recover its startup cost via market activity. It wasn't eligible for that because ISO didn't make the decision to commit it. There's lots of small things like that around bid cost recovery that are tough to train until you've got a good example in your settlement state in front of you.
Right, and that's actually a very good segue to what I was going to talk about, the base schedule. That's why I wanted you guys to be aware of it. So as part of the base schedule initiative that we're going to put in when you guys go live is that you can submit a base schedule less than your PMIN. It's referred to as the startup base schedule. And it's to show that a long start unit is starting up the whole time, and those megawatts should be counted for your resource plan. Now, understand is, as soon as you put that base schedule for that long start unit, you have self-committed it. So at that point, you are not going to get big cost recovery for startup because you have self-committed that startup. Now, if you're going to take it offline and we hold it at min load, now you get min load commitments, but you guys are now going to have the ability, where other ones didn't, is to put base schedules less than your PMIN to reflect resources that are starting up and have a longer startup horizon. That should make, part of the reason, it should make passing the balancing test more accurate, but it also makes it so that the resources are aligned, that the markets and doing valuation is also more accurate. That's one of the reasons why we're getting this initiative in now. Jeff, do you guys know if BANC is going to elect to settle UFE?
To think about right now, I will say yes, because we've already figured out our allocation process for that and Imbalance. It may be something that we choose to undo after we get stable at some future election date. But yeah, right now we've worked out a process for assigning the UFE to the participant, hopefully accurately, that was causing the UFE.
Sounds good. Okay, just thought I'd ask. Because if you were going to do it at Go Live, I was going to start making the recommendation we put that in parallel.
Yeah, good idea. No, I think for now it's sort of in the not broken, so don't fix it category. But after we get stable, we may want to rethink that to simplify settlements, allocations, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. Well, we're at the end of what I was going to talk about, so I'm actually just filling in by things I know. If there's anything else you guys want to talk about, now it's time to do it.
Hey, James, this is Jonas.
Hey, Jonas.
I actually was talking, but I was double muted. I just realized I was double muted. I mean, you already moved to the topic of the UFE. I was going to ask, thanks for bringing that up. When you submitted your base for your commitment side, you're not going to get paid with the minimum load and your startup cost. Let's say you get started up. But I do have a question regarding MSG with overlapping configuration.
Yeah.
And PMIN PMax ranges. Let's say so for these MSG resources that get transition instruction from the market, so say you do one of the rules is that in settlements that you have to be on your from configuration before you actually, during the notification time, before you transition at the time wherein the transition instruction has ended. But then with these overlapping configuration, I don't think there is a threshold wherein it's when you go over the PMax of your configuration from, that will actually still qualify your transition costs. So mostly, like, you're gonna get your transition cost disqualified in that case then.
Right. Well, it's good. Well, and the reason being is we have to. I would say I use the word guess, but it's probably not the right word. Guess which configuration you're in based upon your meter. I mean, when you guys put in your meter, you tell me at the resource level. You don't tell me at the configuration level. So
Yeah.
I have to assume you're following your dispatch, and that's why you're going to qualify.
You mean you're not going to qualify? We're going to qualify. Sorry, I didn't hear that well.
So you should qualify. If we are showing that, based upon the market dispatch, you are in configuration 1, and meter shows and you got dispatch or transition to configuration 2, and your meter shows that yes, you could be in configuration 2, then your transition cost should qualify.
Okay, so in that case, then, like, during the notification period, given that it was like overlapping,
yeah.
So can that be like an issue then now? Because it's like it says that your Pmax is kind of still like in the range of your configuration. Let's say the higher configuration, you still get disqualified transition costs for that.
I'll have to look into that, but I didn't think you got disqualified.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because remember, when you're overlapping, I get a meter value show that you are within that overlapping portion. I believe my system, and I'm going to double check that. I believe my system automatically assumes you did the transition, because I have no other indicator that you didn't do the transition. We gave you the benefit of the doubt in essence.
Yeah,
So
I mean, but that is the case, though. It was ahead of the end time of your transition, so that is disqualifying it then.
Okay. I guess I didn't understand the scenario completely. Okay. I'll look into it and talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, James.
Uh-huh. So actually, Jonas?
Yeah.
When you're doing the validation of market sim, if you see that scenario, put a city ticket in for me.
Okay. If I see a research then I'll do that.
And then we'll do some more discussion, because one, if it's not working the way I think it's supposed to be working, then it may be something I need to look into further. And two, it gives us a good talking point as to what really occurred.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well,
anybody
Jeff,
else have anything? One last call. And I guess also what we have, now that you guys know James and James' ability to explain stuff, we could utilize track 5 calls for questions. I would ask that you guys get the questions to me ahead of the call. I don't want to stump James on the call, but we can use track 5 calls for questions if something arises as well.
Yeah, because I appreciate that, because especially if it's something that I can put together some type of quick presentation that you guys can refer to later on, it makes it even easier for you.
Yeah, that's right. So if nothing else, James, thank you very much for your time. Your voice held out well. One coughing incident. That's pretty good. Long time of talking.
Yeah, well, and while we were on break, I had a couple coffees, but that's about it. I'm on my second cup of coffee. That helps, huh?
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody. Again, I'm available. Well, my schedule is pretty booked, but if you have any questions, feel free to send them to Jeff. Jeff will send them to me. I will be on the track calls.
And city tickets for any issues, if emailing James directly will get a response, but it's easy to get lost. City, make sure it doesn't get lost. So use the city system.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I will. If it's not a quick yes or no, I will ask you to put it in city. Because a couple reasons is if you have the question, someone else is going to have the question, and the city allows us to share that. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. We get 4 hours back, and I know that they were scheduling. I don't know if Jeff, if you're prepared or aware of this. There's supposed to be a 3 to 4 o'clock with Reading. I think it was on the MRI settlement.
I had heard that got postponed, sort of at the last minute. There was enough going on that we could postpone the RC stuff that they wanted to cover.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah,
all
I
right,
think Joanne Ally is working on that, and they postponed it.
Okay. So then I won't worry about it. But what I'll do is I'll take these next 4 hours and I'll reach out to our RT group and find out what's going on with the certificate. So I may have them reach out to you and to everybody and talk about it.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to Kelly at Reading if you want sort of a live interaction with somebody.
Yeah, I'd already planned on calling Kelly. Did you want to be involved in the discussion as well?
Not if you guys fix it. I'm curious to know what the answer is. And I think if you guys get to a place where Kelly can see the correct statements, determinant files, Kelly, if you could send me a screenshot of that, I will share that with everybody else and let them know that they should see something similar. And if they aren't, then maybe we can apply the same fix.
Okay, I can do that. Sorry. I went ahead and did the certificate, so I got that taken care of, so it's all rolling.
Good. I'm guessing it's some minor permissions thing, but I'll let you guys troubleshoot it. And then we'll know for sure, and then we'll share it with everybody else.
Yeah, that's my guess too, and I just want to make sure. Okay. Well, again, thank you, everybody. Have a good lunch, and Happy New Year.
Thanks, James.
Let's hope it has a better rest of the year than it started.
Right. I'm hoping it can't be worse than 2020.
True.
It's got to be.
All right, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
So I will work on getting this recording posted someplace.
Yeah, if you share it with me and Eamon, we'll figure out how to share it.
Okay.
Good.
If you guys want to, we could use the Excellion site that we have still available, or we can post it in the EIM portal as well that we just launched.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The Excellion site might be the best way to get it to everybody with just one file out there. So.
Yep. Yeah.
Good.
So if you want, just let me know. I'll help out with that.
Thank you.
Heidi, I'm letting you know.
So yeah, and do you know how to save it or download you're going to get an email back that says when it's ready. And so if you need any help, once you get that email, just let me know and I can help you with the download and do all that for you.
Okay, because again, I've never done it. So yes, I will be calling you.
All right. Good. I'm here for you, James.
All right. Thanks, Eddie. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks.
Bye.
I'm ending the call now.